What's going on, guys? So today I'm going to show you how to get started with Redux Toolkit. React Redux is a very powerful state management library that lets you create a global state and then alter or access that state from anywhere in your application. Using local state with the useState hook inside a component is great to use when you're creating and managing some state inside the same component, but when you want to access the state in multiple components and different areas of your app, global state can be easier to work with and less prone to errors. There is a lot of boilerplate code that comes with Redux and the best practices that come along with using it. It takes a lot to set up and configure Redux too. And that's where Redux Toolkit comes in. It's the official and opinionated, meaning it does a lot for you. You don't have to make as many decisions. It's configured in a way that's used a lot, so you don't have to do a lot of configuring yourself either. The batteries included, tool set for efficient Redux development. If you go to the usage guide here, it shows you a typical Redux setup and some of the issues with this. The create store function takes positional arguments like the root reducer or preloaded state, the enhancer, and those have to be in the same order or the same spot, which you could mess that up. The process of setting up middleware and enhancers can be confusing, especially if you're trying to add several pieces of configuration. So, adding in your middleware and then adding your enhancers and stuff for your developer tools. And then, the Redux DevTools extension docs initially suggests using some handwritten code that checks the global namespace to see if the extension is available. Many users copy and paste those snippets, which make the setup code harder to read. So a fair amount of things that could go wrong with the typical Redux setup. And then with this Redux Toolkit, they have this configure store, and they have those options with named parameters, which can be easier to read. They let you provide arrays of middleware and enhancers that you want to add to the store, and they call apply middleware and compose for you automatically. And they also automatically enable Redux DevTools, which is awesome. Another awesome thing is it adds Redux Thunk by default. So typically that's the middleware that people add if they want to do asynchronous actions where they're calling out to an API and then getting some data back and then altering their state. And then you have to set up Redux Thunk, but this comes with configure store right out of the box. So that's awesome. Another thing I want to go over is, and I'll go over all this in code here soon, but in normal Redux you'll have a reducer with a switch statement and all these different actions, and state has to be changed immutably, so you can't just alter the state directly. But with this create reducer in Redux Toolkit, you can add your actions right inside the reducer, and you can alter the state instead of having to immutably change the state. This is because it uses the immer library under the hood. So it's technically keeping the state immutable. It just does that for you. So you can just alter the state as you want, and then they make sure that it's done properly behind the scenes, which is awesome. And along with that is when you have nested state, typically you would have to use the spread operator for each above level until you get down to the nested level that you want to change and then change it. But now with this, you can just go right to changing it. So that's super awesome. And then in the documentation, they have this quick start, which is what I'll go over here. And so let's say you have a create React app, and then you would just install Redux.js Toolkit and React Redux if you don't have it already. So I'll go ahead and create a React app. And we'll call it Redux Toolkit. And now the project was created, so we will change directory into the project. And then while we're in here, we'll go ahead and run npm install. And that was the Redux JS Toolkit and React Redux. Added a bunch of packages, super high vulnerabilities. We'll go ahead and clear that. And then we can run npm start to start our application. Bring this in screen here. And so this is the Create React App start screen here. So then we're gonna import this configure store from Redux Toolkit. And this configure store will automatically configure the Redux dev tools, which is awesome. Bring this in screen as well. So we have our source folder with our app. Create another folder we'll call store. And inside that store folder, we'll create a store.js. This is where we will import the configure store from Redux Toolkit. And then we'll export a constant called store. And we'll call configure store, pass in an object as an argument, which for now will just be an empty reducer. So again, this will create the Redux store and also automatically configure the Redux dev tools. And then we will provide this store to React with our index.js top level file here. And we'll import store from our store folder and the store file. We will also need the provider from Redux. So put that provider down here. And we want this to wrap around our app. That way anything in our app can access the store. So inside our provider, we'll have the store attribute and we will pass in the store. Save that. So we created the store. We imported that into our index.js file and hooked it up to React. And now we can create a slice, which is essentially a reducer that has actions in it. And with this, we can alter the state directly. Redux Toolkit allows us to write mutating logic in reducers. It doesn't actually mutate the state because it uses the immer library, which detects changes to a draft state and produces a brand new immutable state based off those changes. So very cool. So inside our store here, we'll create a counter.js. We'll paste that in here. So then we'll add this to our store. We give it a name of counter, but we're also exporting it by default, so we can name it whatever we want. And here, so we'll do import, we'll say counter reducer, so it's a little more clear. Go into our store and counter. And then in our reducer, object here, we'll have our slice reducer, and this will be the counter, which we are importing as counter reducer. So you could have multiples in here, like you might have, posts, where you use a post reducer, etc. And then you could map this to state in your different parts of the application where you want to access the state. Let's save that. And so now we can use Redux hooks to interact with the store as we normally would and access this state. So if I go to the app.js, I'll go ahead and get rid of all this. And so we won't need the logo anymore. And then from React Redux, we can import a couple things. And those couple things will be the use selector. This will let us access parts of the state or those different slices, and use dispatch, which will let us dispatch actions that are also already in these reducers here. These are the different actions. We have increment, decrement, and increment by amount. And so we'll also import those. From our store and then our counter reducer. And then inside our app component here, or any component we want to use this stuff at, make a constant of count, and we'll equal that to use selector, which will pass in some state, and this is just typical Redux here. And then we'll access state.counter, which we're getting from our counter reducer, and then value. And value is coming from the state.value. This is where we're adding a number or subtracting a number. And we have a state.value plus equals whatever we pass in for the increment by amount. And like I said, useSelector is a way of selecting the state. This would be basically equal to using the connect function where you do map state to props or map dispatch to props. And speaking of dispatch, we will make a const called dispatch. And call use dispatch. So we'll add some buttons here with on click events. Call an anonymous function. And then we'll call dispatch, and we'll pass in this increment action that we're getting from here from our counter reducer that also has the actions. And so that button will be add. We'll do another button with the on click handler, another anonymous function. Do a decrement. And that button will say subtract. And then I'll just add a span in here. We'll do count. And then we'll display the count. So if we save that, we'll see we're grabbing the state from the reducer and we are altering the state. And then for that increment by amount, we'll add a button. Yep, another on-click event. We'll say add 10, and so we're just passing in 10. And that'll come in as our payload. And so whatever the number is in the state plus the payload, which we are passing in 10. Save that. We have this add 10. And that is working correctly as well. Now I just put all this in the same component, but this is how you would access this state from the reducer and any other component in your app. And then you can import the actions as well and dispatch those actions to alter the state. And definitely a lot less boilerplate. You know, it's a lot more clean, a lot easier to set up, and all around a great tool. I'm really not surprised because, you know, Redux, there was a lot of boilerplate and a lot of people didn't like it. I didn't mind it, but I get how it could kind of slow you down, or just a lot of going through the motions, and definitely a bit of a task to set up for sure. So yeah, this was a long time coming and it's very nice. Super like it. I'll be sure to make another video to get a little more in-depth with it, but it's a good little intro for you. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, drop a comment and say what's up, and thank you very much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.